I'm George, so I'm here on behalf of the Maytree Respite Centre. For 15, 16 years now, we're moving into our 16th year. We've been recognised as the UK's suicide prevention charity. How we do that, the very specific non-medical approach, I'll detail throughout the presentation. But before doing so, I'd just like to throw out a question to the room. You don't have to answer it now, we can discuss it in the Q&A. Which UK region do you believe has the highest suicide incidence rate? So let's kind of divide the country into northwest, northeast, Midlands, and have a think, and then I'd be interested to know why you've chosen that particular part of the country too. But for now, I'll take you to this staggering figure, which I'll put into some context in a second, and that very arresting image. So 5,821, that's the suicide toll from the year 2017, which are the most recent statistics available to us. We'll be getting the 2018 ones next week. That's more than road accidents. So it's an astonishing total. I just thought I'd get that problem across to you nice and early. And perhaps the reason I've gone for that image there at the back is because men account for 3/4 of that figure that you're looking at here. Again, something that will be interesting to talk about afterwards. But I'm not going to labour on problems without solutions. The B word should have quenched your thirst for that. Yeah? So we'll move on instead to our approach. Our approach sort of derived from this guy. I don't know, anyone recognise this person? That would be miraculous. It's called Carl Rogers. So in the 1950s, quite a thinker about sort of core conditions being one of the most influential factors in well-being. The Samaritans take on some of that thinking. We really do, because we're very much in a residential setting. Yeah? Our founders were former Samaritans. That's how they came up with the idea of extending that type of therapy into face-to-face. So what we are is essentially a volunteer-ran house for suicidal people. The only one in Europe. When I first started at Maytree, my understanding was I was taking on a fundraising manager job for the only one in England. We did lots of research, and the only one in Europe. Astonishing thing, in Finsbury Park, the most normal looking house in the world, but miracles take place in the house. 18,000 there speaks for how many beneficiaries there have been since inception. So we're talking about over 1,000 a year. Quite an incredible achievement. All volunteers are trained prior to undergoing this, as you would expect. The training is in keeping with that Rogers approach. So it's befriending training, listening skills, the ability to empathise if that sort of fails you naturally. But I'm not going to talk about 18,000 people. We don't have that kind of time. We have time to talk about one person, somebody called Ben, who actually ran a marathon for us last year, so I got to know him personally. 2013 was a terrible year for Ben, as bad as it gets for anybody. He found himself in an abusive relationship. His mother and grandmother were admitted to hospital with potentially very, very serious illnesses. He then found that he had a lump on a testicle, and that's when he tried to take his own life. Somebody referred him to us, and before long he was in a telephone dialogue with one of our volunteers. Now, it's not for me to say that that was an absolute turning point for him, but the stay in the house that ensued after that dialogue, I mean, he said himself, has played a huge part in what he now does. He's now a psychotherapist. Not just that, but he's one of those who volunteers for us. So he is offering those ears, that shoulder, to people who are exactly the same situation he once was in. And to me, that's the sort of perfect working model for this. It's great that people who want to have a professional life in this field tend to volunteer for us. But even more impressive for me are that those who came out the other end are very keen to give something back. So what next? Replication. Any Joy Division fans here? Well, you know, that's our man who apparently watched a Werner Herzog film and then decided to take his own life shortly afterwards. That's the reason given. Perhaps if Maytree existed in the north of England, it may have turned out a little different. That is the next step. We have a lot of beneficiaries from as far up as the Highlands who do stay in that Finsbury Park house, but we will never know how many are deterred from making that long journey. Expense, if nothing else. It's a free stay in the house, but we can't pay the expenses to get from the north of England down to Finsbury Park. So it's really, really important that we have a second premise in the north of England. And there is your answer. It's going to be in Manchester, yeah? And answer to that question at the beginning, northeast, northwest, yeah? Yet another reason why we do it the way we do it. And comes down to the big ask. It's all about data. Now, our computer systems are a tiny bit more up to date than that, but not much. I took that photograph a few weeks ago. And that's the haste in this now, that we're about to replicate, and all calls go to a central point. That person needs to be able to accurately decide who stays in which premise. We're all paper at the moment. We have nothing on a database. And that transfer of paper to database is going to cost us the tune of £9,000. It'd be great if we could raise all of it today, but 2/3 will suffice. And we've been told by more than one economist now that £1 spent with Maytree saves the national economy £450. So if you meet that £6,000, that'll be 2.7 million you're saving the country. Do it for your country.